I'll start by going over the current state where we are now. So looking back, recent conditions. So the previous 12 months to the end of this August, rainfall data. The red basically means low, very much below average across the Murray-Darling there. And if we then look at soil moisture, so that's soil moisture over the top 1 metre over the root zone profile. Again, similar story, similar pattern to the rainfall. We're seeing very much below average for most of the basin there and large parts of northern Victoria. As hydrologists, we're interested in that soil moisture. That provides the conditions for generating runoff. If it's dry, there's capacity to soak up more rainfall, obviously, and when it's wetter, there's more potential for generating runoff and so on. So that's just a bit of background. We're starting off from a very dry base. Our outlook is from October to December, so we're already dry. The main drivers for this period, for the current climate, the main one being the Indian Ocean Dipole. An Indian Ocean Dipole essentially, when it's in the positive phase as it is now, means there's cooler than average waters to the northwest of Australia, of the continent, and cooler waters means less evaporation and less moisture in the air for rainfall for Australia. So the opposite occurs when there's a negative dipole. You have warmer water and you get more evaporation and you usually get a higher chance of rain delivered through Australia. At the moment we're seeing that as one of the major drivers. There's also southern annular mode is in a bit of a negative phase. But these two things which are affecting the next couple of months, they typically break down going into summer. So we've only got a couple of months of the main impact from them going forward from here. Just to illustrate, so the red bits on the map represent well below average rainfall. And that data there that's plotted is from, we've grabbed a bunch of previous years where there's been positive Indian Ocean dipoles. So it just goes to show when that phase is in play, that's the kind of typical outlook we get, and that's why we're getting the dry rainfall outlook for the next 3 months, for October to December. As you can see on the right, the map of Australia, that mostly covered in brown there, and that brown essentially, I don't know if you can see the numbers there, but most of that means about less than 30% chance, around 20 to 30% chance of getting just average rainfall in those locations. So it's pretty slim chance of getting even just average. In terms of temperatures, it's pretty strong signal there as well. So looking at the maximum daytime temperatures here on the left, nearly all red for all of Australia. That means there's greater than 80% chance that we're going to get above average daytime temperatures for most of the country, including Northern Vic. Minimum temperatures, there's a lot of red there, but slightly different for most of Victoria. We're looking more at a 50-50 chance, and that just means there's no strong signal for the minimum temp that's telling us it's either going to go extreme warm or extreme low temperature there for minimums. You could still get high and low or lower than average, but there's nothing strong there suggesting it's going to go either way. So that's sort of a graphical representation of Australia. So zooming into Chuka around the region, so yeah, about a 20 to 25% chance of exceeding the median, which is 91 mils for that period. A little bit lower skill for this time of year for that particular outlook. For maximum temperatures, there's about 80% chance of maximum temp being exceeded, 25, 26 degrees. There's pretty high skill where we've got a lot of confidence in that particular outlook, and as I mentioned, a bit of equal likelihood for minimum temperatures being exceeded, the median being exceeded there. So that's the outlook in terms of numbers. Just to put it another way, for the rainfall for Echuca for October through December. So if you break the historical rainfall record up into your 10 equal groups, well, here we've got 5, we've bunched them up, so we've ranged them into very dry to very wet. About a 44% chance of getting in your very dry decile. Only about 13% chance of having around average conditions. So it's a fairly strong message there. In terms of stream flows around the country, so you probably, I don't know if you can read that little legend there, but basically most of the orange dots represent lower than average stream flow for each of those locations for that time of year, for that September to November period. Includes most of the country, including Northern Vic. So the example there is of that pie chart that shows most of the circle area is orange, so most of the forecast sits within that low estimate, and that's for inflows to Hume Dam. And that's means there'll be low flows for this time of year than compared to the usual story. And so moving from sort of monthly seasonal outlooks to longer term, so I'll touch a little bit on projected climate changes over coming decades. But just to lead into that, we'll look at whether that sort of climate signal, how it's changing at the moment from where we are now. So the last sort of roughly 30 years, from 86 to 2018, we've compared average rainfalls relative to the long term, so from around Federation until now. So for that long 1900 to now, that last 30-year period, you can see the cool season rainfall is pretty much well below average. There's a fairly strong signal throughout Victoria. So the end of that 100-year period, we're kind of trending downwards. And to illustrate that in another way, this graph here represents, so that the zero dotted line here is our baseline, our sort of reference. So that's the conditions based on 1986 to 2005 average. And this coloured part of the plot here up to the early 2000s, this is based on observed winter rainfall in southern Australia. And we can see there's already currently a trend downwards on average compared to that reference period. And the bit on the right, that other colour, that's a projected ongoing trend from now if we follow that the same emissions scenario that's occurring now. So it's not saying it's going to happen. It's projected if we continue on with the same sort of emissions. If we maybe take that's known as a high emissions scenario. If we take a medium emissions scenario, that maybe be eased a little bit. But I suppose the take-home message from here, in terms of these projections decades forward, is that we have high confidence in the actual trend going down. There's just a little bit of uncertainty about the magnitude of that trend. Another thing to note, even though you might have that trend going down, you're still going to get variability. You're still likely to have that annual variability from year to year. So it just means that if you're in a period, say 40 years down the track, where the new normal is a bit, say 20% less than that other reference period, a high rainfall year will probably be equivalent to something that's just average now.
So is that the 1 or 2 degree increase in temperature?
That is, that's the, I know it in terms of the RCP85. I think that's the 2 or the 4. Don't quote me on that actually. I'll have to, I can follow it up for you.
That's the next slide, though, isn't it?
Sorry?
That's the next slide, isn't it?
Oh, the next slide's the temperature, but okay, but that's the rainfall, sorry, yeah. But it's in line with that same scenario, matches, there's an equivalent temperature
which is what
plot.
You were talking about the emission, weren't you?
That's right. So under the high emission scenario, that's where we're sort of, yeah, I think that works.
There's also
The pointer.
also a pointer.
Yeah, great.
That front one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So that projection there. That's from that emission scenario, which is we call a high scenario, and that's based on the way we're going at the moment. If we continue with the same sort of emissions trend, that's the projected outlook. And the equivalent, so I suppose moving to temperature outlook, temperature projections, a similar story there, but more of an increase. So this is what we've measured up until, say, the early 2000s, until recent. And then from that point, the projections with that same 8.5, what we call a high scenario, continues up here. So again, that's probably about, what are we here, 2013, that's a 2% increase in, 2030 or something, a 2 degree increase thereabouts. But these other ones, so the blue band in the middle, that's sort of a medium emission scenario. If we reduce a bit more, if we really go hardcore and reduce a lot, somewhere more near that greeny colour there. So generally rainfall down with long-term projections, temperature increasing, the long-term projections based on those emission scenarios. But in terms of, there's also an impact on things like runoff, so you're likely to get lower soil moisture with lower rainfall over parts of southeastern Australia, and also lower runoff generation. So please click again. So zooming here to the southern slopes, Western Victoria and Eastern Victoria. So this line again is that baseline, that 86,005. And these four things represent, so summer, autumn, winter, spring, soil moisture. So it's slightly projected maybe 6 decades forward. It's slightly less than that baseline. But on the right there, you can see the runoff, the equivalent reduction in runoff is a bit more significant. So that's also going to impact, how river flows and so on. So, and that's quite emphatic there compared to the smaller change in the soil moisture regime that's expected. So key messages from that outlook: dry conditions persisting for October to December, warmer than average days are likely, about even chance for warmer or cooler than average nights, lower stream flows. Climate projections, continued drying trend for winter rainfall for southern Australia, but the annual variability will likely remain, higher temps. So if you get less rain and warmer conditions, higher potential ET, so when people do apply water, there's greater capacity for that to evaporate more quickly. So potential evapotranspiration. Less soil moisture, because a lot of the rain that we would normally get under those conditions would probably occur further south. A lot of those cold fronts would start to miss more of southern Australia. So then less moisture, less runoff. So there's a lot of implications there for agricultural businesses. So we're working at the moment on a landscape hydrological model, which is in place at the moment, providing soil moisture runoff outputs across Australia. Historically, we're providing forecasts with that. So if you want to just click through all of those. So just modelling soil moisture at different layers and depths. And one more. So we're looking at 6 months forecast. And the blue bits this is our sort of evaluation of our soil moisture forecast on a monthly. So each of these rows is a month starting from here, and the blue means that compared to our historical reference based on that's modelled with observed data, that the forecast, the bluer it is, the better it is. So usually around September, October, for the first 2 to 3 months, this does a pretty decent job. And we're looking at doing some case studies with people like ABARES in terms of looking at optimal sowing windows, seeing if we can use somehow that deeper root zone soil moisture information to pick optimal sowing windows, or the likelihood of water in the bank hanging around enough to get a decent crop and so on. So that's kind of where my work at the moment is going. But thanks for your attention. Hope you found some useful information there. If you have any questions, yep.
You got any good news?
It's a beautiful day.
What's your degree of reliability
on
your soil moisture and your temperature?
So on the temperature outlook, it's fairly high for this time of year. We'd say it's high skill. The rainfall is a bit lower for that October to December, but when you break, that's for the 3-month outlook. When you break it up individually, October outlook to November and the November, the rainfall is more of a moderate skill. It's more the December one from now that's a little bit lower. But there's a lot of information on that. If you're familiar you've gone off the thing, but there's a link there. So the Bureau website, there's a climate services, and just recently they're outputting weekly climate outlooks now. So you're doing weekly, fortnightly, monthly scale. You can do 3 months. There's a whole bunch of information because the uncertainty in that changes depending on the time of year, depending on location. So some areas it's very high likelihood or high certainty for the output for say spring. Other times of year it's a bit lower. So it really varies. So you really encourage you to get onto the website and have a look at those climate outlooks and a lot of the information there, because we do a lot of, we always compare historical forecasts to what we observe and always do those checks. There's a lot of information there on skill and so on. So yeah, I just can't rattle off every single location, but yeah, it does vary. But I know with rainfall, typically winter, spring is usually a bit more reliable. And it's when you get those change seasons, say autumn is a bit less reliable when you do predictions around there. But again, I'm speaking generally, but yeah, there's a lot of info on the web there. So if anyone has any more questions after and wants to have a chat, feel free. But thanks for your time. Yeah.